The Italian Renaissance was the heart of many innovations in politics, art, and technology. From the early 1300s to the late 1600s, numerous new ideas modernized the way people lived. One of the giants during the Renaissance was Niccolo Machiavelli. As a historian, politician, diplomat, and philosopher, he invented political science. As the leader of the Second Chancery, Machiavelli had many responsibilities in the government. He used all the rights he had as a leader to influence Florence and the countries around it to protect his beloved city. After his banishment in 1512, he wrote The Prince. His book was ignored at the time, but today he is seen as the father of historical analysis. Before Machiavelli, Florence was a republic, though not as we see a republic today. It had a constitution that limited the power of nobility, making sure that one person was not able to gain too much political power. At the time, Italy was broken into many different city-states, each having its own government. The Republic of Florence viewed itself as the ideal city-state, where every citizen was guaranteed freedom and a right to participate in government. Then, the Medici disrupted the peace. The House of Medici was one of the most wealthy families at the time. Through carefully planned maneuvers and statecraft, and at times direct violence, the Medicis disassembled the Republican framework and took control of Florence. From Cosimo to Piero to Lorenzo, the Medicis ruled over Florence until their banishment in 1494. Piero de' Medici II, also known as Piero the Unfortunate, caused their expulsion for being violent, arrogant, and incompetent in office. 2 years later, Machiavelli made his first appearance in government. In 1494, after the death of Lorenzo de' Medici, Niccolo Machiavelli witnessed the overthrow of the Medicis. The city, having no leader, was up for grabs, and Girolamo Savonarola, a very popular and zealous cleric at the time, took control. Savonarola then set up a democratic republic system, the best form of government Florence had seen. Everything Machiavelli saw in Savonarola and the Italian government greatly influenced his attitude toward politics. In 1498, he rose to be the secretary of the Second Chancery in Florence, the second highest leading body in Italy. At the age of 29, he was put in charge of foreign affairs and the defense of the city. He was in charge of the Italian militia and implemented many new ways to use the military to protect Florence. Savonarola did not last long in Florence. He was burned at the stake by Borgia Pope Alexander VI, his declared enemy, after being condemned as heretical and schismatic. As secretary, Machiavelli went on 24 missions to neighboring countries, negotiating alliances for the protection of Florence. He met with Emperor Maximilian, traveled to Pope Alexander, King Louis VII, and encountered other important figures during his time. On his multiple missions, he experienced many different political personalities. Incorporating everything he saw in the different rulers, he began to innovate political sciences. His philosophy and what it meant to rule differed greatly from that of everyone before him. Yet he was never able to put his new ideas into practice due to the return of the Medici family. In 1512, Giuliano de' Medici took back control of Italy. Immediately dismissed from office, Machiavelli had to leave Florence. 1 year later, an arrest warrant went out for Machiavelli, saying that he had been plotting against the Medicis. After wrongfully being accused of conspiracy, he was jailed and tortured for 3 weeks. Upon being released, he was banished from Florence. Now, living on a farm outside of his beloved city, he had time to continue his revolutionary thoughts on politics. In 1513, he wrote The Prince, a book he believed would redeem himself in the eyes of the Medici. Machiavelli says that, "With the utmost diligence, I have long pondered and scrutinized the actions of the great, and now I offer the results to your highness within the compass of a small volume." His book was a manual that would allow a prince to view himself as if looking in a mirror, letting him understand how others saw him, so he would be able to change his actions accordingly. Machiavelli thought that his book would be taken seriously. He wanted to give the Medici a better way to rule, but at the time, it was completely ignored. The prince begins by explaining the many responsibilities of a ruler. Machiavelli describes the various tactics of ruling and power and how to gain and maintain power over a state, mostly focusing on politics, power, goodwill, and warcraft. Then Machiavelli explains the practical way to rule. His philosophy completely separates religion from politics, focusing on a realistic and rational ruling strategy. The prince offers practical advice, such as the advantages and disadvantages of various routes to power. Machiavelli's perspective on ruling is pragmatic, citing historical analysis to make conclusions on how people would react to a ruler and how a ruler should react to its people. His book also explains how a prince would acquire power over a state. The new prince would have a hard time taking power from the traditional prince, but when he was granted the position, he would rule more efficiently and effectively. One of his most controversial notions was his on human nature. Machiavelli believes it more important to keep the people's well-being than nurturing their morality. He replaced morality with utility, using the ideas of usefulness, necessity, success, danger, and harm. Analyzing history, he found that people are naturally selfish, short-sighted, fickle, and easily deceived. Every bad human quality had a benefit. A man's self-centeredness and selfishness would allow him to react to danger with courage for self-preservation and inevitably preservation of the state. A human's nature to copy or mimic others would take away from individuality, but would make it easier for them to follow and cooperate with the leader. Fickleness and credulity allow humans to be manipulated by a good leader to act benevolently. In The Prince, Machiavelli introduces the idea that the end justifies the means. This statement is what led Machiavelli to be thought as cruel and cynical, though he is deeply misunderstood. He suggested intelligent, precise, meticulous planning to achieve the best result. Through writing The Prince, Machiavelli also advocated practical, realistic, and utilitarian ideas for political sciences. He introduced the idea of studying history in order to understand the present. Then, his ideas were disregarded, but today we realize that his philosophy was far ahead of his time and age. In the words of Renaissance historian Ada Palmer, Machiavelli says that history should be studied, not as a series of moral maxims intended to rear good statesmen by simply saturating them with stories about past good rulers and hoping they become virtuous by osmosis. History should be studied for it tells us about the background and origins of our present, and past events should be analyzed as a set of examples, to be compared to present circumstances to help plan actions and predict their consequences. Many distinguished historians have acknowledged the influence of The Prince. The late Leopold von Ranke and Friedrich Meinecke of Germany, and John Delbruck Acton of England believed Machiavelli to be the founder of modern political science and historical analysis. Because of Niccolo Machiavelli, we look to the past for knowledge that would help us with the present and the future. Students today are being taught this same lesson. They participate in History Day. They use Machiavelli's concept of analyzing history in every history class. Today, Machiavelli's separation of state and religion is found in our First Amendment, which states that citizens are free to worship any god they want without government interference. In recent news, Vladimir Putin is directly compared to being the essence of Machiavellianism, using military power to gain and maintain control over his country. Implementing what he saw in the Florentine government and political leaders all over Europe, Machiavelli used all the rights he had to outline the goals and responsibilities of a leader to thoroughly reshape political science and historical analysis.